I think as I read this book, I wasn't sure if it was just a treatise on not violating the 10th commandment. In other words, thou shalt not covet. If you read the New Testament unpacking of that, like Paul calls it idolatry. And so as I read Solomon or the sage or the wise man's pursuit of all these things as ends in themselves, which Christians can do for God's created things. You preached a sermon about enjoying God's gifts but not worshiping them as ends in themselves. I see that as a real danger for believers or, of course, unbelievers who exchange the Creator and His goodness to worship the creation. So what have you to say about the nature of covetousness for the Christian who can tend to look at wisdom or food or pleasure as ends in
Anything
themselves?
can become a god. Yeah. It's amazing. John Calvin said something to the effect that that our minds are a factory of idolatry, and so anything can hit us from every direction, and so we have to be careful of that, and to remember that God gives us these gifts, and to turn to the giver and not just to the gift. I bought a chair. I found a chair. I was telling you about a leather chair I've been looking for. For years I always wanted a leather wingback chair, and here I find one, and I was sitting in it the other day, and then just and praying. That's what I usually sit in that chair, and realizing how this good deal on a leather chair could become an idol, something that here I'm enjoying the Lord as I sit in this chair, but it can become something that takes me away from Him. Yeah.
Thinking about the chair more than actually
exactly.
I'm sorry.
So it's
sinner.
I am a sinner. I confess it.
Oh man,
that's why
Isn't
I need
that
a Savior.
Calvin's right. Our idol factories.
Yeah. So I think Ecclesiastes is good at that. It brings us back to some of the basics of living our lives, doing what we can where we are. That work is a good thing, even though it's a curse. In one sense, it's something we can now do for the glory of the Lord, because He has given it to us, and it's one of His blessings.
Yeah, and regarding the opposite of covetousness, which would be a godly Christian contentment, what have you, as obviously the pastor of this church, or what would the sage say to someone who's struggling to be content in their situation? It's a challenge for everyone.
Yeah.
But to the believer who is struggling with their current state, what's the word of contentment? Obviously, it's different for their own circumstances.
The preacher or the teacher of Ecclesiastes is telling us that he's tried it all, and it doesn't satisfy, and so whether it's wisdom or labor, or he goes through all in the early chapters a number of things that Solomon certainly went after.
Food and drink, the whole nine.
Yeah, everything. And so anything can become something that we covet from someone else. But we have to remember that life is a gift. It's short. It's going to be over quickly. Something older I get, the more that comes home. You know it with your age. You know it. Theoretically, but now you realize that I'm only going to be preaching the gospel at best for another 10 years or so, maybe 15, who knows?
Right.
But life it blows by, and the book of Ecclesiastes helps us see how brief it really is, and how things do not make sense without God.
It's a vapor. Yeah.
They do not make sense. The world does not come together without realizing that God is there and has made us and is calling us to Himself in Christ.